to Advocacy at 8. I'm attorney Sandra Jill Poland, your community legal advocate. Advocacy at 8, my new YouTube legal series, launched October 1st, 2018. Each video, in 8 minutes or less, will educate you on an important legal issue. You and your community will be enlightened and empowered. Thank you for viewing Advocacy at 8. I am attorney Sandra Jill Poland, your community legal advocate. Our topic for the recent videos has been Dying Without a Will, Is It Worth the Cost? We've been exploring the extremely high cost and unintended consequences of not taking the time and effort of putting into place a plan to protect your assets. We've been looking at some real cautionary tales, situations where costs could have been avoided, money could have been distributed to beneficiaries more smoothly, more quickly, and more effectively. We've been talking about the litigation surrounding James Brown's estate, and 3 of those issues that we're going to be looking at: the status of his marriage and what could have been done, sort of a takeaway to protect against that issue. 2, there was an issue regarding the paternity of his youngest son. What could have been done to avoid that? And then the 3rd issue was sort of the contesting of the will, which still goes on to this day, 12 years after his 2006 Christmas Day death. And that involves sort of who can control or who will control his copyright and intellectual property, basically his music catalog. The first 2 issues, the status of his marriage and the paternity of his son, dictate who will control that music legacy. And that involves a sort of a copyright issue involving the termination of copyrights and all of that. And we're not going to get into that during these sets of video. But 3 sort of takeaways to protect yourself and protect your assets. 1, just like you go into the medical provider, the doctor, every year to get a medical checkup, a physical, just like you go to the dentist, every 6 months to get your teeth cleaned, to get your teeth checked for any cavities. You should, establish a plan for your assets and then get that plan reviewed every year just to look at it to see if any changes need to be made. And then certainly if you have undergone a significant life event, a divorce, a separation, if there's a split in terms of your business, your partnership, if you want to change your beneficiaries to any of your pensions or retirement funds, certainly you want to go in and update your plan in light of that significant event. If there is a question as to the status of your marriage, you think you're divorced, but you don't really know, you don't have any kind of confirmation in terms of document, you think you might be a widow, but you don't know. If there's someone that you're going to be giving your assets to, and there is a question in regards to their marital status, you need to get that confirmed. It's much easier, much more effective, certainly less costly if you determine now what the status of that marriage is. Also, into the paternity, if there are any kind of outstanding paternity issues, you need to determine and confirm now what the paternity status is, as opposed to leaving it in limbo and then waiting. There are unintended consequences for all of these issues that are not resolved, and the cost and the uncertainty is not worth it when you wait like James Brown did, or his family after his death, and now they have to go through 12 years of litigation to determine, was he really validly married? Was his son, really his son? That drains the estate and like his adult children said, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to settle with his wife, because all of the money is draining out of the estate and there won't be any money left to distribute. And that's exactly what they did. The camps here, you had the estate, you had Heine, who was claiming that she was James Brown's lawful wife, and the courts did uphold her claim and found that she was the lawful wife. You had the son that they had together, and it was determined that James Brown II, who's now 17, was James Brown's son. And the reason why that paternity was at issue was because James Brown's long-term attorney, Buddy Dallas, of 24 years, he was the attorney at the time of, for 24 years at the time of James Brown's death, and his adult children, they all knew that James Brown had gotten a vasectomy in the 80s when he was, being the target of all of these child support actions from the mothers of his adult children. He had six adult children. And so they knew he had had a vasectomy, and they said, well, we're questioning now whether he's the father of this child. Well, after James Brown, the paternity was not determined while James Brown was alive, and it could have been. Tommy Ray Heine and James Brown had the child, the son, James Brown II, in June of 2001. They then got married in December of 2001. He died Christmas Day 2006. So in those 5 years from his birth to James Brown's death, he could have at any time had a paternity test, confirmed the paternity, but obviously he never thought that he wasn't the father. And so to him, it wasn't an issue, but still that should have been determined. And it wasn't until after James Brown's death that there were 2 paternity tests that conclusively showed that James Brown II was in fact James Brown's son. And so after years of tests and litigation, that's no longer an issue. The same thing with the marriage, but that's a little bit more complicated. And so we'll address that in our next video. Thank you for watching Advocacy at 8.